Welcome to another episode of English Speaking Made Easy. In this episode, like we had in the previous episodes, we will be dividing the program into 4 segments. And to start it off with, like always, I'm going to begin with Grammar Express. Now, in this bit of grammar that we are going to do, we are going to conclude our section on nouns. So, the last bit I am going to do with you is what we call collective nouns. Okay. Now, collective nouns, as is evident from the term collective, it refers to a single word. I mean, it refers to a group of people, a group of animals, a lot of things, a group of ideas. So, it is like the word is about group, taking things together. Well, the interesting thing is that different things, different animals and even different groups of people all take a different collective noun. And that is why it is a little difficult and you might need to look at the words used a little more carefully. Now, as we said, collective noun takes things in a single and takes things as a single entity. Okay. So, we use it to describe groups of animals, groups of people or things. Now, these words interestingly are sometimes interchangeable and many English writers and speakers take liberty to interchange them to describe different things. Like for example, if you have seen this word swarm. Swarm is the collective noun we normally use for groups of insects like ants, flies, bees. We say a swarm of bees, a swarm of flies, a swarm of ants. But you know what, many writers tweak that and they use it in different other contexts too. Like sometimes when you, many writers when they want to talk about a very busy crowd of people, they might use the word swarm. It is to give you the feel of how a group of ants work. That is how they are kind of trying to bring that similarity in. So, the thing here is once you are familiar with these words too, you will notice that you can use them in a variety of areas. You can interchange them and bring in a lot more depth and meaning with your choice of collective nouns. Now, first, but let me just give you certain common collective nouns. Whenever we have common collective nouns that we use for people, okay, what are the common collective nouns we use? Okay. So, for that we are going to give you a list of those words. Now, just imagine there is you see few musicians performing a song. You do not call them a group of musicians. The collective noun for that is band, a band of musicians. Similarly, a company has many directors. Together they are called not a group of directors, they are a board of directors. Any other expression apart from board would be very awkward. You refer to them as a board of directors. A band of musicians, a board of directors. Then of course, if you have singers, when they come together they form a choir. They are a choir of singers, and when there are students sitting together to study, they are a class. Now, if there are lots of people, they are a crowd. Now, what about thieves? There are 4 or 5 thieves who have joined together to kind of loot a house. They become a gang of thieves, a pack of thieves. Now, there is a lot of people who are very good at a subject. They come to question you. They are a team of experts, like you have a team of players. So, these are the collective nouns that we use with reference to people. Now, the next bit is when with animals, each kind of animal takes a different collective noun. So, then the normal ones are herd, flock and all that. Now, we will look at each animal and how their groups are called. You have ants, you call them an army of ants. An army of ants, that is how they are referred to. You see birds together in the sky, they are a flock of birds. Sheep also take the same collective noun of a flock, it is a flock of sheep. Similarly, cattle, deer, cows, they all are called a herd of deer, a herd of cattle. That is the collective noun we use for those animals. Now, bees, we have a hive of bees, or we can also say a swarm of bees. You have a nice dog at home, it has given birth, or she has given birth to some puppies, or you have a cat that has given birth to puppies, and they call a litter of puppies, a litter of kittens. They are called a litter. So, now if you want to speak about crows, we say a murder of crows. Now, if there is about hounds, a pack of hounds, a pack of wolves. So, you see the different kinds of collective nouns we have been using. When you see fish, we say a school of fish, a team of horses. So, you want to speak about lions, it is a pride of lions. So, every animal seems to have its own unique noun, collective phrase to describe a group. The ones you really need to know, which are very, very important for you to know, to speak and to express, are words like flock, herd. These words can be used in for many animals, and that is very, very important. Okay? Flock, herd, and these kind of things. So, these words you need to remember, these collective nouns, and you need to use them for common animals that you would like to speak about. There are in fact many more collective nouns. I have only chosen the most common ones, because if you look at it, every kind of animal can have its own unique collective noun to describe it. So, that in order not to make it confusing, I have kind of limited it to some of the most common collective nouns. At least with this you can make do in a lot of contexts when you want to speak about animals. Now, there are common collective nouns for things, grouping things together. So, for that I will give you a few examples. Okay? The common collective nouns used for things, we have something like, you have flowers, we say a bouquet of flowers. We say a bunch of flowers too, depending on what we are giving. You have a lot of ships going, so we say a fleet of ships. You say a forest of trees, so many stars in the sky, we call them a galaxy of stars. You have cards, the playing ones, it is a pack of cards, a range of mountains, a pair of shoes. So, these are the collective words, collective nouns that we use for things. Now, if you look at these three collective nouns, the confusing one that we generally will have to pay little attention to and learn is perhaps the words we use for animals. The others, I suppose, through our everyday common usage, we are quite aware of this. Now, when another thing that comes in terms of confusion regarding collective nouns is that people are often confused as to whether to treat a collective noun as a singular or a plural, and this primarily depends upon the sense of your sentence. Like, for example, if you want to say the audience is happy, you have a look at that sentence, the audience is happy. Now, when you say the audience is happy, that is because we are taking as the audience as a singular unit, all expressing the same emotion. On the other hand, look at the next sentence, the audience are all wearing comedy wigs. Now, the problem with collective nouns is primarily that you will always be confused as to whether to use them as a singular and a plural unit. And the thing here is that most people would expect you to use a collective noun as a singular unless you have a good reason to treat it like a plural. So, so that becomes a bit of a confusion for most writers. So then what you can do is, one way to kind of make this easier is to avoid confusion, add a word to denote the members of the group, that is, the members of the audience are happy. The members of the audience are wearing comedy hats. The advantage here is when you add the word the members, it will automatically become a plural. So, then you will not have a confusion there. The members of the jury, I will just explain that to you once again. If you want to say the jury is, the jury agrees, singular. Now, if you're confused whether the jury should be taken as a singular or a plural, add the word members, then automatically it will become plural. The members of the jury are. So, you won't have to have that confusion between whether to use a singular or a plural, because this is a little tricky area there. So, you just remember, when you are in doubt, add the word the members to the collective noun, it will automatically take on a plural verb. So, then when treating a collective noun as a singular, you then need to be very consistent. For example, just look at this example. The group is happy with their performance. Remember, is singular, there is plural. So, if you want to denote that the group, everybody in the group was happy with the performance, do not use a plural, take the group as a singular unit. So, instead of there, say the group is happy with its performance. Using the wrong collective noun, and sometimes how people is sometimes very useful as a literary technique. Some collective nouns are quite versatile. For example, you can say a pack of cards, a pack of thieves, a pack of wolves, all of them can be used. You can use the word pack for all three contexts. Similarly, another very versatile collective noun is group. It can be used with many things, but you need to remember, you just can't alternate any collective noun. You can't just use all collective nouns for the same. I mean, you be very careful what collective noun you use in a particular context, because in some contexts it can become very awkward. It can sound awkward. So, you can't say a bouquet of wolves just because you want to interchange. It will make no sense if you use a collective noun like a bouquet of wolves, or a swarm of flies, a litter of ships. You cannot alternate them. So, you need to be careful which collective nouns you can alternate. Remember, all collective nouns cannot be taken as an alternative for each other. So, you need to be very careful. So, now we will just wind up on collective nouns, and I will just give you a run through on what we discussed. We discussed the different words we can use with collective nouns. We discussed both in terms of people, in terms of animals, and in terms of things. That is the basis you need to know. The next thing you need to understand is when to use a collective noun in the singular context and when to use a collective noun in a plural context. Generally, remember, collective nouns are always used in a singular context. Just in case you have to use it in a plural context and you are undecided whether to use it in singular or plural, add the word the members of. The members of the jury, the members of the committee. So, then you can automatically make it into a plural without much confusion, or else you can use it in a singular form. And so, these are some of the important rules, and also we have this rule about not being you have to be very careful how you choose a collective noun. You can't keep alternating one for the other. So, this was the gist of the use of collective nouns, and with this we come to an end of this episode's Grammar Express. Now, let us go on to the next item we have, which is Lexica, your guide to good vocabulary. Now, in this episode we will be discussing 3 words relating to our feelings or our emotions. Now, we know that we are the melting pot of so many different emotions, and often we have to, when you want to express what you feel, there are certain words that help us express our state of mind. The first word is the word frustrated. Haven't you heard of this word frustrated? Haven't you all felt this particular emotion? It is derived from the Latin word frustratio, and it means feeling or expressing distress and annoyance. And this normally comes from an inability to change or to achieve something. So, when you have a word like frustrated, how do we use this word? Just imagine you've been trying to write an exam and you've tried multiple times, but all the time it has ended up in failure. The first predominant emotion you get is a sense of helplessness, hopelessness. It makes you feel very frustrated. You're trying again and again. So, that is something that happens. The emotion you feel is called frustration. Okay. So, frustrated is the first word, and it is very, very important because it's a common emotion that we express. So, frustrated. I've been trying to clear my driving test. He has failed the driving test for the third time, and so he was very, very frustrated. When you try to do something over and over again and it does not work, the emotion you feel is frustration. Okay? Shall I spell that word out for you? F-R-U-S-T-R-A-T-I-O-N, frustration. The next word, the next emotion you can feel is embarrassment. Now, embarrassment as a word has multiple origins. There is a bit of it from Portuguese, from Spanish and from French. Now, embarrass generally means when you feel a sense of shame, when you feel that you've done something wrong, that is when you feel a sense of embarrassment. Okay? So, what you need to do is when we use the word embarrassed, you can use it with those contexts. Just imagine that if someone has said something to you, you've been caught stealing and someone sees you, or you've been taking a ride on a bus without taking a ticket, and the ticket inspector kind of comes over and you feel very embarrassed because you've made a fool of yourself. So, embarrassed is to feel a sense of shame, to feel a sense of you feel a mixed sense of guilt for having done something wrong. You're going on to the stage, you suddenly trip and fall down accidentally. You feel very embarrassed. So, that is the word embarrassed. And we use that word because there are many instances in our everyday life when you can experience the sense of embarrassment. So, we began with the word frustrate, and the second word was the word embarrassed. Okay? Now, finally, we are coming on to the third word to express an emotion. The third word with reference to a feeling or an emotion is the word annoyed. And annoyed means to be slightly angry or irritated. I got very annoyed watching the film. When you feel a slight sense of anger and irritation, when you generally feel, it's not a very high sense, it's not very angry, but you feel slightly irritated. The word is annoyed. So, I have given you three words to express emotion. One is a word called frustrated, which is for when you become a little hopeless, you're trying very hard. The next one is embarrassment, which is a sense of shame, a sense of guilt, a sense of sense of being ashamed at the prospect of having done something wrong, at having made a fool of yourself. That's the word embarrassed. The third word is annoyed, which expresses irritation, slight anger, mild anger and irritation. So, these were three words that are useful when you want to express yourself in terms of how you feel, and these words we can always cover that in the coming episodes. Okay? Now, let us go on to the next segment that we have, which is say it right. The say it right is about correcting your pronunciation. In the second and third episode, we had covered silent letters, and silent letters in words, as you might have realized from the previous episodes, can produce a slight confusion in usage. Now, we covered a few letters which cause problems. There are a few other letters also which are silent in sentences. This is what we are going to deal with in today's episode. Here we are continuing with the silent letters, and now we are going to do with the rule of the silent letter N. Whenever N comes after M at the end of a word, it is silent. Like for example, these words autumn, it's not autumn, it's autumn. Hymn, column, None of these words, though there is an N at the end, the N is silent. Now, P is another word which is silent, many words with P, and whenever you have P, P is silent when it occurs at the beginning of many words. And it uses, especially when the combination is with P and the next letter being S, P and T, P and N, all these combinations, the P is silent. Like for example, look at this word, psychiatrist. P has S after it, but we do not pronounce the word P, it goes psychiatrist. The second one, pneumonia, there is P and but P is not pronounced there, it is just pneumonia. Psychologist, P is not pronounced, P is silent. So, in all these words, P when it is followed by these letters are silent. Now, we have S also being silent in some very common words. Now, S is not pronounced when it comes after a word like I, island, isle, ale, it does not come in. Okay? In none of these words, in isle, island, islet, in none of these words is S pronounced. Now, let us look at the silent letter T. Now, T is not pronounced in these common words, and these words are whistle, hustle, bustle. In none of these words we have T pronounced, even in words like Christmas, listen, hasten, soften, none of these words do we have T. And look at the word there, an interesting word, Gourmet. It is not gourmet, it is gourmet. We do not pronounce the T at the end. So, in all these words, the T is silent. So, unless you know which letter is silent and the general rules regarding this, you can make a lot of errors when you pronounce the words. So, it is just good to have a basic idea, at least of some common words that you are likely to use that could have a silent letter. Now, the final segment, that is, let us talk. Now, we've been discussing different areas of conversations, from greetings to small talk. Now, here we are doing a little bit on how to ask for a clarification. Now, this is important because you might be talking to a person, perhaps the person is speaking too fast or the person has an unfamiliar accent. Perhaps you did not understand. See, it is very, very normal to ask for clarification, or you want something to be repeated. The bottom line here is people are generally okay to clarify things for you as long as you can be quite polite. So, if you do not understand a few phrases that you can use to ask for a clarification. In the midst of the conversation, if you did not understand something, you could say something like this, I am sorry, I did not understand. Could you repeat that for me? I am sorry, I did not understand. Could you please explain that again? I am sorry, could you please elaborate on that for me? Or if it is a very informal context, you could say, care to elaborate? I think it would be best if you say, could you please or can you please elaborate on the details? Okay. And very, very importantly, we native speakers do put in this word along with it, I am sorry. They do not directly start off by saying, could you repeat it? They would definitely say, I am sorry, but could you please explain that again for me? I am sorry, could you please repeat what you just said? When you ask it like this, people would be happy. Or you could say, I am sorry, I did not understand. I am sorry, I did not catch what you said. Okay. So, these are certain words that you could say. In a little more informally, if it is not, if you do not want to go into a very formal way, you could just say it again please, but the way you voice yourself, the way you put your tone, that is the most important. So, this is how you ask for clarifications. Just pick up these phrases, try to use them, and that becomes very, very nice when you want to ask for clarification. Well, of course, other words like pardon is also nice, you can't, if you don't want to elaborate a long sentence, at least you could say pardon and the person would automatically repeat what he said for you. Now, we are getting our conversation straight, we have indulged in small talk, we have asked for clarifications. Now, of course, the next part is bringing the conversation to a close. You need to now end the conversation you are having. Perhaps you are in a hurry to go, Perhaps you want to catch, you are running late, so you want to kind of conclude a conversation. So what do you do when you need to conclude? There are many ways in which you can express both politely and informally that you would like to leave. Okay, perhaps you're late and you want to go. So you can say, I have to get going. It's time for me to go. This is often polite and it's kind of neutral. And then you can also use other expressions. I have to go, could we continue later? This is a little more informal. Now there are many other expressions that you could use with regard to being to close a conversation. Now if you have got all the information that you wanted as part of the conversation, you could say something like, thank you so much for your help. You could end the conversation like that, thank you so much for your help. Or you could say, you could thank the person before you go. And if you have plans of, sometimes you want to kind of keep in touch again, please keep in touch. I'll see you soon, please keep in touch, goodbye. These are certain words that we use to generally close a conversation. So you can use these expressions like the very same expressions that we use to begin a conversation. You can use these expressions to close a conversation. Okay, so with this we come to an end of this episode. So until we meet next time, thank you and goodbye.